this is the panel about how to invest in comic books. So obviously, I'm assuming everyone here is into comics, otherwise you wouldn't be here at this panel today. So let's just get started with some introductions. My name is Miguel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Shortboxed. We're a platform for buying and selling comic books. We launched a couple of years ago. We're the fastest growing marketplace for buying and selling comic books today. So I'll be moderating the panel. And to my left here, we have Wes Smith, formerly from A1 Comics. If you folks are in the North Bay, one of the best comic shops in Northern California, and he spent many years as their director of marketing, running their live sales, so he knows a lot about buying and selling comic books. I have Eitan, the owner of Cowl Comics out in Oakland, amazing shop for those of you in the East Bay. And we have HoMan Lee, a very, very prolific collector and very influential collector in the comic book space, so he's just a wealth of knowledge to share with us. Guys, if there's anything else you want to share?
What about you? HoMan, do you want to share?
I'm just a bargain collector that just got lucky meeting some cool people in the community.
Awesome. All right, well,
I just want to say thanks, Gene, for putting together such a handsome panel.
That's right. That's right. Cool, so just real quick in terms of our agenda and what we'll be talking about today, obviously we're talking about investing in comic books. I'll be providing just a little bit of historical context there. We're also going to learn about how do you value comic books, what makes an investment level comic book, how do you decide what to buy, how do you decide how to sell it, when to sell it, how do you value the comic books that you have. And what I'm personally excited for is towards the end of the panel, I've asked each of the panelists here to talk about the books that they would actually invest in themselves given a budget of $1,000 and $10,000. Those seem to be just the very key points for new collectors entering the space. They often ask us, what should I buy? What should I invest in? How do I know if I'm making the right purchase? And so I'm very curious to see the picks that they have at those various price points for everyone. So again, let's get started. So a bit of historical context about investing in comic books. Comic books are big business. Obviously, if you've been to many cons, you've walked around dealer booths, you've seen just how expensive these books are. Sure, you have some dollar books and some cheap books there, but you've seen books for hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. In many cases, the top comic books in this industry sell for upwards of millions of dollars. And Action Comics 1 just recently sold for, I believe, $3.4 million. That's the first appearance of Superman. So it really is a big business. And the comic book secondary market, that's the resale market, is a multi-billion-dollar industry globally between eBay, Shortboxed, other auction house platforms directly from peer-to-peer on social media. There are hundreds of millions of dollars changing hands every single day. So a lot of folks who are new to investing and collecting comic books are actually surprised to know just how big the secondary market is. And it's really shocking that there are millions of dollars changing hands every single day. And since really comic book collecting took off in the early 1960s, that's when people really started collecting comic books. What we've seen over many decades is the stability of comic book values rising over many years, over decades, without the wild volatility that we see in other asset classes, or especially in other alternative investment assets like sports cards, for instance. I hate to throw sports cards under the bus, I'm into them myself, but with sports cards, what you've seen is wild volatility and wild swings up and down every few years. You know, they spike in value and then they crash. They spike in value and then they crash. As an investor, that's very stressful. Versus comic books, it's been very, very stable over many, many decades, even during recessionary periods, which we could argue we're entering one right now, but back in 07, 08, back in 2000, back in the mid 80s, when the market entered a recession and stock markets crashed, comic books actually remained fairly stable. So what's surprising among high-level collectors is that they use comics and art and alternative investment assets as an anti-inflationary hedge, which is great, and they tend to lean towards physical collectibles and physical assets like gold, art, coins, comic books being one of those things. Obviously for us, we're comic book nerds, so we just love to collect art. We're collectors, I'm sure all of you are as well. Now, what we've seen over the past 10 years is this amazing tailwind of the MCU films, of the DC films, that have thrust these characters and these icons of culture into the mainstream. And finally, as a lifelong comic book nerd, making comic book movies cool, making comic book characters cool, so it's very satisfying for myself to say that. But what this did is actually bring a lot of eyeballs into the comic book investing world. And it brought a lot of new collectors into the space, and as a result, it brought in a lot of investors into the space as well. Whereas we all grew up collecting comic books and we continue to collect them for nostalgia, there's an entirely new collector that's coming in purely as an investor. And so that's hopefully what we're going to talk about today, and how to make those right decisions. So right off the bat, why should comics be considered investment assets versus other types of collectibles? What is it about comics that make them valid investment assets?
Let's go first.
I think you covered the major parts of it, right? They're not volatile the way other things are. You just watch these values go up, and sometimes it's slow, and sometimes it's incredibly fast. And then usually once they reach a new height, they don't drop. They might then settle a little. But if you bought a $500 book that in the course of a year became a $1,000 book for legitimate reasons, not because of a rumor or an influential website or something, but for legitimate reasons, people have more interest in the book, and now it's a $1,000 book. Yes, it could become a $900 book. It could become an $850 book. But the chances of it going back to a $500 book are slim. And then on top of that, you're getting the opportunity to buy something that you care about as an investment, which has value. Because even if it did fall back to $500, well, hopefully you bought something that you at least like to look at, as opposed to a stock, which nobody likes to look at a stock.
No, yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I mean, you were talking about physical assets, and I'm a big believer in physical assets. I think that, again, what you were just saying about you can't look at a stock, or you don't get a lot of. You can pull out a comic book and you can look at that art and you can sit there and enjoy it for what it is. Either it's something that's nostalgic for you, or the cultural impact of it. Some of these books, if you're going back to the Golden Age and whatnot, some of them had tie-ins with what was happening in the world, war, etc. So there's a lot of other aspects to that. I think that, if you can get something else out of that besides purely in the investing side of it, there's a lot of upside to it. So,
right, yeah. So, quick question for HoMan. As I consider you the collector's collector, and at what point does a comic book go from, let's say, a quote-unquote collectible over into an investment? How do you make that decision, or how do you see those two being different, or the same if they are?
I think it's the dollar amount that, I started out buying dollar books. I wouldn't pay more than $1 or cover price. And then the first thing I bought that was expensive was the first appearance of Captain Marvel, not the female in the Marvel Superheroes 12, and that was $20, and I was like, I'm not gonna pay that. But then I looked it up, I was like, oh yeah, it's worth a lot more than 20, I'm gonna buy that. And that was so by stepping up, $20 is not a big investment, but once it becomes into I would say anything $500 or more, that's a significant investment. So everyone comes at a different place in their life. If you're a hedge fund manager, you're not gonna even think about something under maybe a couple $1,000s. If you're making $60,000, $70,000 a year, $500 is a big investment. And so that requires you to actually make a determination of, is this worth a certain percentage of my income, and will I see appreciation of it? Personal, nostalgia is a huge thing, and that's one thing that buoys the value of comics, is that outside gold or stocks that you guys talked about, comics provide nostalgia. And what is nostalgia? It's comfort. And in bad recession times, bad economic times, what do people look for? They look for comfort. And I think that's a major thing that we all understand innately, but maybe is not expressed in the collector community. And I think that, for me, at $500 or above, I won't grade a comic. I won't invest the time and the expense to get a book graded unless I think it's worth more than $500. But that's my personal.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. So this is for any of the panels here. How do you decide what comic to invest in? When you're ready to buy a book or make an investment decision, how do you decide what book to invest in? And related to that, what makes a good investment book? How do you make that decision? I'm sure Wes sees thoughts all the time at A1.
Yeah. I mean, that is a interesting question. There's a lot to that. I think it comes down to a few things. It comes down to, obviously you've got a budget, what you're willing to pay for something. It comes down to, you know, what you do collect. Obviously, you know, you can look at the market and say something is a better investment than X or whatever. But you know, I know the term, you know, buy what you like or collect what you like gets thrown around a lot, but you don't want to, when you're spending this kind of money, you don't want to buy something that you're like, why did I buy this? You know, why do I have this book? Even if there's a lot of value there, I do think that you should make a decision, whether it's a character or an artist that you really, really like. I think that that will make you sleep better at night when you're spending a lot of money, or, I mean, and a lot of money in the context of your budget. I mean, maybe, you know, $100 is a lot to you. And so if you're spending $100 to invest on a comic, make sure that you're investing in something that you feel good about from the standpoint of the market, longevity, like where that character is going, but also something that, you know, you look at and you're like, this is cool. You know, I know that sounds dumb, but I do think that that is an important aspect of this hobby that we can't gloss over.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's dumb at all. I mean, you're buying a physical piece of artwork, and it's something that you're going to look at. So if you're spending hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, you should enjoy it. You should be able to look at it and enjoy what you spent your money on. So I can't say that's incredibly important.
So that is an aspect to it. And then you know, as far as the money side of things, you know, you can look at trends. There's a lot of tools out there, you know, as well as anybody, like GPA, Go Collect. There's a lot of pricing tools. You can look and you can see right there, you can see all the data, you can see where a book was a year ago, where it is now. And you know, you can use those tools to kind of predict a little bit where it's gonna go. So I think that if you just start from what do I like, what's my budget, and where is that book going? And then if you see a trajectory, if it looks like it's going down, then, you know, maybe you might want to hold off on buying that, and it's your money, it's your decision, but use those tools. So figure out what you like, figure out your budget, and then use those tools. That is kind of the most basic steps that I would recommend anybody.
Awesome. Eitan, I'm sure a lot of people come into the shop also asking similar questions, just wondering what to buy. I'm sure people come and say, hey, I have $500, what should I buy?
Yeah. The thing I talk to with people often is staying ahead of the curve. You don't want to constantly be chasing the market. You know, a book blows up and they're like, I gotta get that book because it's just gonna, you know, keep going, or if I don't get it now, I won't be able to get it. And maybe that's true, but that doesn't make it the right time to buy that book. You want to be ahead of the game. You want to be looking down the road or looking at a different road than everyone else. Some people I can't convince some people. There's an announcement for a new MCU movie and they must have that book. And like, but that's also just like their way of collecting and their way of investing, and that's totally fine. But there's other people I talk like, let's slow down. Like, let's talk about who's connected to that character, what's a part of the universe that hasn't even been explored yet, and is there an opportunity there? So yeah, that's the big one for me. If you're investing, don't chase.
Yeah, people do it a lot, and that's when we see these bubbles on certain characters. And I definitely agree with you. I try and advise people to, I've said it multiple times, like on our lives and stuff like that. When there's some sort of announcement, I'm like, okay, if you're interested in this character, get it now, because when a trailer drops, etc., it's going to be more out of reach. And I'm like, and I'm not telling you this just to sell you a book. I'm telling you this as somebody that cares, because when you come back, when the trailer drops, you're going to be paying a lot more. And I feel bad because I see it happen all the time.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about the timing of when to make purchases tied to announcements or trailers. I know, HoMan, you follow the news very, very closely. In your experience, when are the best times to buy or not buy or sell a book based on these announcements and news?
Well, just to back it up a little bit from what Eitan said is when everyone zigs, you zag, and that when you buy what you love, and you'll never go wrong. But timing-wise, like stock, buying the rumors, selling the news. And that seems to be pretty consistent with comics too, is that you hear something, if you're interested in the character, buy it now, and then once the news drops, everyone who is interested in that would have either purchased it because they heard the same rumor, and the market's already saturated. So when the first trailer drops is the time to sell, because I think after that, once the movie comes out, everyone who wanted that character or that comic has it.
Exactly.
And then it goes down a little bit. Maybe that's a time to buy if you don't already have it. Then wait until after the movie. Like Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, there was rumors of Shuma Gorath, or that creature, tentacle creature, shot from like a $15, $20 book to over $100. Came out, that creature died.
Yeah.
Long-term viability in the MCU, one and done. What's that book going for now? $15, $20.
Yep.
So
I think that the strategy of selling when like a trailer drops or something is actually now so common and so popular that the market gets flooded at that point. So I don't know if that rule of thumb works anymore. It's actually something I'm trying to figure out. Like, what is the time to sell these not rumor books, these books that are tied to movies? If you're waiting for the first trailer to drop, so is everyone else. So maybe that'll work sometimes. I think other times you're going to be competing, and then unfortunately it becomes a little bit of a race to the bottom. A book that you could have sold for $100 the week before, somebody is like trying to get out and selling it for 25, and that's where the market's going to go. So I think there's an adjustment there happening right now with that strategy.
I just want to add one thing of, like, we're talking about what to do, but I just want to bring up what not to do. And I think FOMO, or fear of missing out, is a real thing. And
absolutely, yeah.
Don't chase a book. Don't be fooled by FOMO and influencers. People who are personalities on Instagram or something might tell you to buy something, and like you blindly buy it, and like you know nothing about it. Like, that's on you. Don't be that person who listens to somebody because they say it's going to be worth something. Do your research. If it's interesting, then buy it. If you think it's something you want to keep and hold because you love it, buy it, but not for FOMO.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, in the same vein of what not to do, in my opinion, one thing I tell people to never do is don't panic sell. Don't panic sell things.
We've all done it.
We've done it, but it's that is one of the worst reasons to sell something, because you see prices dropping. Sell things because you know, maybe if there's a personal reason you need to get some money, sure. Or if you want to maybe buy something to treat yourself or whatever, but don't go, oh my gosh, this book is dropping 15, 20%, I need to sell it now. Because the odds are, if you just wait a little bit, it may bounce back the other way. And you have to think how many other people are seeing a drop and they're trying to do the same thing, which is not good.
Right. So cool. So aside from the speculative nature of comics and the news cycle and the trailer cycle, what actually determines the value of a comic book? What makes one comic book more valuable than another? And how do you know this? And how do you research that? And how do you know exactly whether a book is worth whatever it is that people are asking for a book? I know there's many factors here.
Do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead. You guys do a lot of books.
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors when it comes to the value of a book. It could be, so obviously, you know, simple economy, supply and demand. But then there's more to it when it comes to that. A great example is Hulk 181, first appearance of Wolverine, well, first official in the eyes of the market. But that is a common book, really, when you compare it to a lot of other, you know, harder to find books out there that are very expensive. But the thing about that is that everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people love Wolverine. A lot of people want that comic. So even though that there's a lot out there, the price is still really expensive, even for a low-grade copy, because, you know, so there's a lot of factors. But then you also have books that are very scarce. They're really hard to find, And that affects their value a lot more, and they may be a lot more obscure. They may be characters that, you know, not everybody knows about, like Wolverine, that isn't on t-shirts like Wolverine. They may be Golden Age characters, great examples like Spectre. Not a lot of people know him, but his first appearance in More Fun Comics is extremely expensive because it's a book you cannot just find. The print run is probably substantially, I don't know the numbers, but it's lower than Hulk 181. Sure. So again, but the demand for that character Spectre is a lot more niche. So you need to find a Spectre fan, but that Spectre fan knows there's only so many copies out there, so they're willing to pay a lot. So there's, again, there's a lot of factors there, but you know, I think that it's a lot of kind of tried and true rules with hard collectibles that you can apply to comics for sure. So.
Right. One thing I want to add to this is, obviously demand, you know, increases the value, but do not confuse scarcity or rarity with value alone.
Yeah.
Because you could have very, very rare books. You may be talking to some dealers on the show floor that will say, oh, there's only one copy of this on the census. Well, that's because no one cared to get that book graded because it's worthless. And so just don't get caught in the trap of being blinded by scarcity, because that does not necessarily mean that it's valuable.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Gene. I think that one of the most important aspects is people do have to care about that character or that comic, or the artist. So.
Right, so the perfect storm is historically significant book, right? First appearance, origin story, classic cover, combined with scarcity is sort of a double
and
whammy.
condition.
And obviously condition.
And tradition, yeah.
Of course. Awesome, so one thing I wanted to ask you guys is about blue chip books. You hear people talking about blue chip comic books. For those of you who are unfamiliar, blue chip comic books in the comic book space are considered I would say, the safest bets, ones that will quote unquote always be valuable, things that are always good purchases to make. There's a handful of blue chip books out there. In your experience, what do you consider a blue chip book? What makes a book a blue chip key? And then what are some examples of some that you've come across?
I think the clearest, most obvious agreed upon ones were like your Marvel Silver Age first appearances, your X-Men one, your Hulk one, Daredevil one, Amazing Fantasy 15, like all of those are very clear blue chip comics. So like everybody will agree they're valuable, they're desirable, and they're sellable. They just kind of check all the boxes. And I think those are the boxes you need to check to become a blue chip. Like kind of what you're talking about, like scarcity doesn't mean value. Like just being old and just being rare does not make you a blue chip. You know, there has to be desire there as well. And then, I mean, really, I guess you count your DC books too. I mean, you're looking at your first appearances of characters that are on lunchboxes, T-shirts, bumper stickers, you know, tattoos, all these things. That's a blue chip to me.
Yeah, no, that's you nailed it. I think characters that are part of like the cultural zeitgeist, you know, pop culture. You know, Spider-Man's never going away. Like people are never going to stop caring about Spider-Man. So Amazing Fantasy 15 is always going to be a collectible book. People pay, you know, astronomical numbers for just a page of that book because the significance of it. And so that is a good example when you say on lunchboxes, on T-shirts, things like that. It's so ingrained in our culture that because of the importance of that character, those books are blue chips. They are never not going to be worth something.
Yeah, definitely. And villains. Don't forget the villains, like Fantastic Four number 5, First Doctor Doom.
Oh yeah.
You know, blue chip as they come. I remember talking to, I think, Gene about 5-6 years ago about opportunities, and like you said something about like Fantastic Four is way undervalued now because no movies. They weren't even printing Fantastic Four comics at Marvel at that point, and all of those were significantly less desirable on the market than like a Spider-Man or an X-Men. But now they're like the hottest issues. So
you know, it's a Thanos effect.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Before you know, the Infinity Saga really took off. Thanos was a cool villain that hardcore comic book nerds knew about, but once he was thrust into the mainstream, he suddenly became, you know, a AAA sort of character, and his first appearance just exploded after that.
I personally think a lot of DC Silver Age first appearances and first characters will probably be the undervalued currently relative to the Marvel market.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. Yeah. Where should we be looking? What are some of the undervalued characters, titles, types of books that we should be looking at right now?
Yeah, I think you just nailed it. That's something actually that not only myself believes, a lot of the Silver Age DC, but Brian, the owner of A1, who's been doing this for over 30 years, because of a lot of the issues with the DCU and all that, the fact that they've had trouble kind of getting their footing. A lot of those characters, you can get them extremely cheap compared to Marvel Silver Age keys, and a lot of those keys are earlier than Marvel keys. Yep. The Silver Age for DC started earlier than Marvel, so you have to take that into consideration too. Those are 10-cent books versus 12-cent books, also, and some of them are scarcer. First appearance of Justice League is not a book that I saw nearly as often as a lot of Silver Age Marvel keys at the shop.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, full agreement. I mean, we should all be looking at DC. It's gonna happen. There's value there. It's like, it's gonna be a big return for you, I think, and you can like play favorites. Go whoever interests you, because it's gonna come around. There's gonna be maybe not a full MCU because that's gone so far and sucked so much oxygen out of that room. But still, we're gonna have an Animal Man movie. Yeah. Like, I swear to God, you like go buy a first appearance of Animal Man for $100, and in 10 years you're gonna be so happy with yourself. But you have to be willing to wait that. You know, it's gonna take some patience.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with the DC thing. In particular, Superman. This is my bold take. I think Superman is grossly undervalued right now, for whatever reason. But when you think about Superman, the icon, the character, the Superman logo is the most recognizable logo in the world, up there with Coca-Cola, you know, and Disney, arguably even more so. And the fact that you can buy Golden Age, Silver Age, classic Superman covers and Superman keys for the same price as a modern variant that came out 3 months ago, is ridiculous. If you're asking someone, you know, should I buy this random variant with a 500 print run for $1,000 or go and buy Golden Age Superman, 10 times out of 10, I tell them to go back and buy the Superman. I think it's grossly undervalued. It's criminal almost. So that is something that I'm personally telling a lot of folks to start investing in. Is this DC keys, especially Superman.
I want to touch upon something I mentioned earlier about condition, and a lot of younger or newer, not necessarily young as an age, but newer collectors, like it seems like 9.8 or nothing. So you're not going to get a 9.8 Golden Age, you know. Yeah. So don't care about pristine condition when you're talking about silver or Golden Age, and it's all relative. So if you find something from 1945 that's 2.0, the rarity of that as opposed to getting a 9.8 1 in 200 variant, I agree with Gene. Get the Golden Age over the modern variant. It's not manufactured rarity is not the same as actual rarity.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great quote. Yeah, and I think that also it's something that comes with doing like collecting for a bit of time, but also like what you're touching on, like a 2.0, like a lower grade Golden Age book, something that's really hard to find, but you still can hold that book from 1949 or whatever. Also, that 2.0, make sure that you feel good about that 2.0, because not every book is the same and not every grade is the same. And you may look at that book and go, well, like the colors look great, you know, and you start to develop a gut instinct with something like that. Like, you know, hey, I'm happy with this book for the grade and everything. And that's a little bit more nuanced, but it's something that as you go through conventions and you look at comics, you'll start to develop a sense for like something that you feel good about buying at that grade.
Yeah. So. Awesome. So we have a few minutes up, and I really want to dive into the actual portfolio building. I know a few folks in the audience have asked us to think about this. So the question here is, if you're building a portfolio today with two different budgets, let's start with a $1,000 portfolio, and then after we'll get into a $10,000 portfolio. With $1,000, what do you invest in from the lens of an investor? Something that you want to buy, hold, keep for many years, and hope that increases in value. Do you buy one book for $1,000, or do you buy multiple books for $100 or $200 each? Let's start with HoMan at the end, actually.
Don't be like what I did and buy 1,000 $1 books. You might make a few dollars, but I would recommend, if I did it all over again with starting at 1,000, I would get Ultimate Fallout for probably a 9.6 condition. You can get one for about $850 on the Shortboxed app. I just checked just to see what the prices were.
I did not ask him to say that, by the way.
But that's great. I could compare it. Like you were saying about like what you were feeling about condition, and even if it's the same grade, you can go on sites and like on eBay or Shortbox or other. They're like wide changes in pricing, but one might be a 8.5, but it has cream pages, you know, versus a 8.0 with white pages, and people might consider white pages more valuable for personal reasons than something off-white. So I would say Ultimate Fallout 4 for $1,000 because of the cultural zeitgeist for Miles Morales, this generation's, and for underrepresented minorities. If you're not a minority, you don't understand what representation matters to people in the comic community, and I think Miles Morales represents something that that you just feel, people that identify with Miles really feel strongly about it. That's that comfort level of the nostalgia thing. So as the 5-year-olds get older, that value will keep going up. And for the $10,000, I would not recommend, my personal choice, because
we are not financial advisors, so do
take
this as opinion and not actual financial
personally, advice. My favorite character is Silver Surfer, and favorite villain is Galactus. On Instagram, my avatar is Silver Surfer, but I don't own the first appearance of Silver Surfer or Galactus, so I would get Fantastic Four 48 and Fantastic Four 49. I think about $5,000 for each in a 7.5 and a 9.0 combination. You could probably spend $10,000 and get both of those in a upper mid grades, and we're very fine condition.
And we know Silver Surfer and Galactus are coming to the.
They're coming.
Oh yeah.
It's coming. Yeah. Eitan.
Okay. With my $1,000 budget, that's when I'm gonna look at DC. And that's, I can say personally what I've done in the last couple of years. I don't buy a lot of comics for myself because I own a store, so I have like the world's biggest collection. It's 2,000 square feet. It's you know, there's a lot in there. But I bought a few books in the last couple of years in this value range. I bought I'm horrible with issue numbers. I bought the first appearance of Adam Strange in like a 4 or something.
22.
Showcase 22. And I think I paid like $925 or something for the copy I got.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell you what grade it's in. But that's a character to me that it's a harder to find issue. It's a character who I think would make who I love personally, and who I think will make a perfect movie when it comes. If anybody, right? I think if anybody read particularly the new Strange Adventures series that came out over the course of the year.
It's great.
It's so perfect, right? The man of two worlds, you know, a hero on one, a villain on another. Which one is he? Or neither. Like it's that was. I was really happy to get that. Another one I picked up was the first appearance of Guy Gardner. I think we're gonna get Green Lantern done right at some point. It's probably gonna star Jon Stewart because he's the best. But I also think you're gonna have a whole cast, and I think that the breakout, and there's so many opportunities in Green Lantern. Like, so we should all be like stacking up the 500 different Green Lantern first appearances, because once Green Lantern is done, they're all gonna be there. And I think Guy Gardner would be the breakout, right? Because he's funny, he's an asshole. He's got everything that like makes that makes the most popular like Marvel cinematic characters work. Guy Gardner's the same thing. And so that's when I got, again, and that was actually quite a bit cheaper. That was, I think I got a 7.5 or something for under 500 bucks. So yeah, with my $1,000, I'm looking at DC, I'm looking for opportunity, I'm getting characters that I love and hoping for the best. With my $10,000 budget, I'm going for certainty. You know, I want I don't know the values as well.
There's less room for error than spending $10,000.
Exactly. So I know one example you shared with us was an X-Men 1 at a 3.0. That's around, like that's what I would get. Like that book's gonna, I will never lose my ass
Stealing
on
the
my, sorry dude, gotta come up with another one. But I mean, that type of book is what I want. I want a book that's a known quantity, that's not gonna go down in any significant way.
It's a blue chip key.
It's a blue chip key, and I'm gonna ride it until my kids go to college and then sell it.
Nice, those are good picks.
Yeah. For me, again, if somebody was to come up to me and ask me, the first question I would ask them is, what do they like? Because if they were asking me for advice, but if I personally had to pick, you know, at $1,000 and I was trying to maximize it, I would pick kind of low to mid-grade, big banner DC Golden Age books. So if you could find stuff, they're not going to be keys, but I'm talking about like Green Lantern and Flash, the big banner stuff from the Golden Age. If you could find stuff with presentable covers in that 2.0, 3.0 range without any tape or restoration, I think that, you know, those books aren't the kind of books you're going to find at like a yard sale. You're not going to find them out in the wild. And I think that, again, DC is a lot cooler than Marvel, so there's a lot more room to grow there. So as far as $10,000, I mean, I'm an X-Men fan. I'm not going to say an X-Men 1, but I do think that, you know, I'm hopeful that DC is going to right the ship as far as the DCU, but Marvel is really proven, they've had some issues, but they've really proven that they've kind of got this thing down to a science. And we know the mutants are coming, we know X-Men is on the horizon, and I've been shocked how much the market has pulled back on X-Men. I think that there's a ton of room for growth, and I think that if you're looking for stuff that is a little bit more scarce, Silver Age X-Men, first appearance of Banshee, first Polaris, those are books that they are kind of not looked at as A-tier keys. So like, it's not an X-Men 4, X-Men 2, anything like that. So you might be able to get a deal at a show or a shop. So yeah, it would be a combination of those keys is what I'm saying. So yeah, sorry, it's not so elaborate, but there you go.
Nice. So for myself, for the $1,000 portfolio, when I started thinking about this, I wanted to get a few books that each had a chance to increase in value over time. And if one does better than the other and one doesn't, then you kind of make it up, and it allows you to have a safer portfolio. For me, I looked at the Copper Age, which is essentially the 80s through the very early 90s. There were a lot of very key first appearances that happen, and high-grade copies can still be had for $200 to $300 each. So I had some quick notes here. X-Men 266, that's the first appearance of Gambit. You were talking about X-Men books that have done a bit of a pullback, so I think now's a good chance to get a first Gambit for a couple $100. G.I. Joe number 21, that's the first appearance of Storm Shadow. Massive, massive franchise. That's one of the top G.I. Joe keys with a huge, huge fan base. Secret Wars 8. I wish we had photos, but it's a cover that everyone knows. It's the black Spidey suit with the orange cover. The Jazz Hands Spidey cover. Very iconic. Swamp Thing 37, back to DC. This is the first appearance of John Constantine. Very, very cool character that has a huge cult following, and you can still get a nice high-grade copy for just a couple $100. And Spider-Man 316, it's a Todd McFarlane cover. It's the first full Venom cover. ASM 300 is the classic Spider-Man black suit cover that we all know, but that sells for thousands of dollars, so that doesn't really apply here. But you can get the first Venom cover, Todd McFarlane classic cover for a couple $100. So a combination of those, you can get all 5 of those for around $1,000, and which really cool, iconic covers, all from the 80s. At this point now, books from the 80s are 40 years old, which is insane. There are a few folks here who were like cringing when I said that, but it's crazy that books from the 80s are now 40 years old. You know, I still think that books from the 60s are 40 years old, but they're not.
No.
Yeah, so you know, these characters are getting more and more popular, especially you have an entire generation who grew up with these characters, now wanting to reinvest in those characters. And then as far as the $10,000 portfolio, similar to what Eitan was saying, you're making a big bet, so you want to be very, very safe here. You don't want to take too much of a risk, so you want to stick to blue chip keys. X-Men 1, I think, is a fantastic bet. You can get a 2.0, a 2.5. If you're really lucky, upwards of a 3.0, just because the market has pulled back right now. So it's a good buying opportunity to get an X-Men 1, big Marvel key that we know will be popular for forever, essentially.
And one thing to kind of double down on the X-Men 1, one of the reasons why I think it's a great key is it's not just one first appearance.
Right.
It's multiple. It's all of the X-Men. Yeah, and Magneto.
Yep.
So I mean, that's the thing, is that, you know, you're really hedging your bets when it's a lot of times, you know, when you're buying a key, you're buying the first appearance of Venom, the first appearance of so and so.
That's a good point.
You're buying the first villain and all the first main characters.
Right.
So.
And they're all on the cover.
Exactly.
Which is even better. So when you're buying first appearances, if it's their first appearance and they're on the cover, again, you're hitting twice. Versus first appearances where they're not on the cover, those aren't worth as much. You may be wondering, oh, first appearance of Doctor Strange, really expensive book, but he's not on the cover. If he was on the cover, it would be worth a lot more, just because of the visual eyes.
Exactly,
Another pick that I have for $10,000 is another Marvel key, Incredible Hulk #1. So of all the main Marvel Silver Age mega keys that came out there, that had one of the lowest print runs. Simply because when Hulk came out, he wasn't that popular of a character, so they didn't buy as many copies, so they didn't end up printing as many. And at a 1.0, they're selling for around 9,000 or 10,000. It seems like a really low grade copy, but because there weren't that many that got printed, there's only around 50 copies on the census for a Hulk 1 in a 1.0. So there's not many out there, and 50 on the census for that grade is really low for Silver Age. Typically with other books, there's hundreds of copies in a particular grade, but this only has 50. So I think Hulk is again, very undervalued still.
And on the Hulk 1, one of the biggest books I sold at A1 was a 7.0 Hulk 1.
Wow. What, how much did you sell that for?
Well, because it was a private sale, but the point is, the seller, or not the seller, the buyer was really nervous, a lot of money, and he kept watching sales, texting me, you know, concerned. And I said, just give it a few months, and almost double his money as far as like what Heritage sales were doing.
Yeah.
I think he's still holding the book, but I just said, you know, this is a book that, you know, you just hold on to because you made a lot of excellent points.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing your picks. We're going to wrap it up here. I want to make sure that we get everyone a chance to get one of these books that we brought. We may not have enough copies for everyone, but you can go to the Cape and Cowl booth, which is right on the show floor in the middle. How many copies do we have?
We've got, I think I've got 20 copies here. We might have another 10 to 20 at the booth. We also have other variants there. I'm happy to give you a different one instead. Or come see me at the shop and I'll give you one. I'm gonna give you something. But I only have so much of this right here, right now.
Yeah, so we'll step down, we'll just bring them out and you guys can come up and grab them. And if you don't get a copy, go to the Cape and Cowl booth.
Yep.
Also, you're inspiring me to do another giveaway. So we do have Shortboxed t-shirts in the Shortboxed booth. We've got a nice stack of them in the booth, so come by the booth. We're booth 508. We're right in the middle of the show floor where all the comic book dealers are. Just come to the booth, talk to anyone there, let them know you came to the panel, and we'll hook you guys up with a t-shirt there. Again, just huge thank you to everyone for coming to the panel.
Thank you guys.